Good afternoon and welcome to the Washington Report with Tea Party Patriots Action. I'm Bill Pasco, Tea Party Patriots man in Washington, and let's get right to it. The House will return Tuesday and stay in session through Thursday. The Senate will return Monday and stay in session through Thursday. Last week in the House came back on Monday and voted to pass two bills under suspension of the rules. On Tuesday, the House passed a rule governing floor consideration of a number of bills. On Wednesday, the House took up and passed H.R. 2965, the Small Business Regulatory Reduction Act, by a vote of 223 to 190, with 15 Democrats crossing party lines to vote with 208 Republicans in favor. 11 Republicans didn't vote. Then the House took up and passed H.R. 4305, the Dump Red Tape Act, by a vote of 269 to 146. with 59 Democrats crossing party lines to vote with 210 Republicans. 9 Republicans did not vote. Then the House took up and passed H.R. 1005, the Class Act, by a vote of 242 to 176, with 30 Democrats crossing party lines. 7 Republicans did not vote. On Thursday, the House took up and passed H.R. 1069, the Protect Our Kids Act, by a vote of 247 to 164, with 33 Democrats crossing party lines. 6 Republicans did not vote. Then the House took up and passed H.R. 1049, the Trace Act, by a vote of 247 to 166, with 33 Democrats crossing party lines. 6 Republicans did not vote. And then they were done. This week in the House will return tomorrow with the first vote set for 6:30 p.m. At that time, the House is scheduled to take up 25 bills under suspension of the rules. On Wednesday and Thursday, the House is scheduled to take up 4 bills pursuant to a rule. They are H.R. 3628, the State Planning for Reliability and Affordability Act, H.R. 3638, the Electric Supply Chain Act, H.R. 3898, the Permit Act, and H.R. 3668, the Improving Interagency Coordination for Pipeline Review Act. Last week in the Senate came back on Monday and voted to end debate on the nomination of David A. Bragdon to serve as a United States District Judge for the Middle District of North Carolina. On Tuesday, the Senate voted to confirm him to that position. Then the Senate voted to end debate on and then to confirm the nomination of Lindsey Ann Freeman to be a U.S. District Judge for the Middle District of North Carolina. On Wednesday, the Senate voted to end debate on and then to confirm the nomination of Matthew E. Orso to be a U.S. District Judge for the Western District of North Carolina. Then the Senate agreed to a motion to proceed to S.J. Res. 91, a Congressional Review Act resolution of disapproval of a Biden-era rule submitted by the Bureau of Land Management. Then the Senate voted to end debate on the nomination of Susan Courtright Rodriguez to serve as a U.S. District Judge for the Western District of North Carolina. On Thursday, the Senate took up and passed H.J. Res. 131, a joint resolution providing for congressional disapproval of a Biden-era rule submitted by the Bureau of Land Management. Then the Senate failed to end debate on S.Res. 520, an executive resolution authorizing the en bloc consideration of a number of executive branch nominees. It turned out one of them was the president's nominee to serve as director of the Office of Drug Control Policy, the so-called drug czar. And because that's a cabinet-level position, the resolution fell afoul of the new rule allowing for en bloc consideration of executive branch nominees below the cabinet level. So that resolution will come back this week without the director of the Office of Drug Control Policy included in it, and we'll talk more about that in just a moment. Then the Senate voted to confirm Susan Courtright Rodriguez to serve as a U.S. District Judge for the Western District of North Carolina, and then they were done. So this week in the Senate will return today with the first vote set for 5:30 p.m. At that time, the Senate will proceed to a roll call vote on a motion to end debate on the nomination of Robert P. Chamberlain to serve as a United States District Judge for the Northern District of Mississippi. Then, based on the Majority Leader's cloture filings, I anticipate we'll also see votes on the nominations of William J. Crane to serve as a United States District Judge for the Eastern District of Louisiana, and James D. Maxwell II to serve as a United States District Judge for the Northern District of Mississippi. And at some point on Wednesday or Thursday, we're going to see a vote on that en bloc nominations resolution, except this time it's going to have even more nominees in it, because some committees were able to consider and recommend for floor action nominees last week, which will end up being a benefit to the president because it will mean some nominees will get through the Senate this year rather than missing the boat this year and having to be resubmitted next year. I also anticipate that on Thursday, we're going to see a vote on the Democrats' bill to extend the COVID-era Obamacare enhanced premium tax credits for another 3 years. We'll talk more about that in a moment. Now to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court is back in the news with 4 cases of interest to us. First, the court ruled last Thursday that Texas can use the new congressional district map enacted by the legislature and the governor earlier this year for next year's crucial midterm elections. That makes it likely that the GOP's hold on the state's U.S. House delegation will move from a 25-13 net plus 12 margin to a 30-8 net plus 22 margin. The unsigned opinion, which carried by a vote of 6-3, with the 3 most liberal justices voting as you would expect, excoriated the lower court opinion. Quote, "The district court improperly inserted itself into an active primary campaign, causing much confusion and upsetting the delicate federal-state balance in elections," unquote, it said. It's a good thing the Supreme Court acted as quickly as it did in that Texas case. Candidates who wish to run for Congress in next year's elections in Texas have to file their paperwork no later than today. The second case of interest to us is called National Republican Senatorial Committee v. Federal Election Commission, or NRSC v. FEC. Almost 25 years ago, in a 2001 case called Federal Election Committee versus Colorado Federal Republican Campaign Committee, the court agreed that limits on the amount of money that political parties can spend in coordination with their own candidates for office are constitutional. In the case the court will hear tomorrow, the challengers, that is the National Republican Senatorial Committee, are asking the court to overturn that ruling from the Colorado case and allow political party committees to coordinate spending with their own candidates. Seems perfectly reasonable to me. The third case of interest to us regards President Trump's order to restrict birthright citizenship. On Friday, the court announced that it would agree to decide the legality of President Trump's order in a case involving a DOJ appeal of a lower court ruling that blocked President Trump's executive order telling U.S. agencies not to acknowledge the citizenship of children born in the United States if neither parent is a citizen or legal permanent resident. Though they did not set a date for the oral argument, it is believed that the court intends to hear the case and rule on it in its current term, which ends in June of next year. The fourth case of interest to us is a case that the court is hearing today. The case gives the court the chance to overturn a 90-year-old precedent that limits the president's powers to fire leaders of so-called independent agencies of the federal government, like the Federal Trade Commission, the National Labor Relations Board, and the Merit Systems Protection Board. Conservative legal types have for decades believed that 1935 case called Humphrey's Executor was wrongly decided. The ruling in that case prohibits the president from firing the heads of so-called independent agencies without cause. But he's the president, they say, and he's the one who got elected, and if they lead an executive branch agency, by definition, they exercise authority in his name under the Constitution. So who are they to tell him he cannot choose to put his own people in there? Stay tuned. Now, an election integrity update. Assistant Attorney General for Civil Rights Harmeet Dillon on Friday afternoon posted to X a short video updating us on her office's efforts to ensure election integrity by enforcing federal election laws. Here's what her office has done since taking over from the previous administration. She has reached out to all 50 states, asking them to share voter rolls with DOJ so that DOJ can help them comply with the Help America Vote Act, which requires states to maintain clean voter rolls. 4 states complied voluntarily. DOJ sued North Carolina early on, and the state is now checking the voter records of 100,000 voters who were improperly added to their state's voter rolls, and they're going to fix their problem voluntarily. DOJ has agreements in place almost with another dozen states, and she expects that soon those states will be forwarding voter data to DOJ for comparison with DOJ's records. There are 15 lawsuits pending against 14 states. As she says, that's right, California got sued twice because the states refused to provide voter data to DOJ, even though many of them freely share such information with certain nonprofit groups like ERIC. So DOJ is engaged with nearly 30 states, and here's what she's found. Of 47.5 million voter records examined, they included 260,000 plus dead people who were enrolled. They're going to be removed. DOJ also found several thousand non-citizens enrolled to vote in federal elections. DOJ is partnering with local law enforcement where appropriate to prosecute those who voted unlawfully in U.S. elections. Now to the Comey and James indictment update. You may recall that right before Thanksgiving, a federal district judge dismissed the indictments of former FBI Director James Comey and New York Attorney General Letitia James on the grounds that Lindsay Halligan, the interim United States Attorney for the Eastern District of Virginia, was unlawfully appointed to her position, and therefore the indictments were invalid. CNN reported last week that the Department of Justice plans to refile indictments against the two. Prosecutors sought a new indictment against James, but the grand jury wasn't buying it and failed to return an indictment. On the Comey front, a different federal judge issued an order Saturday night that complicates the case against Comey. Comey was indicted for lying to Congress about whether or not he had authorized a friend to leak information about the FBI to the media. His friend, a professor of law, petitioned a judge to have the FBI blocked from using his communications with Comey, which had been previously obtained by DOJ in 2019 and 2020 as the result of search warrants. So for now, at least, the DOJ cannot use those communications between Comey and his friend. And without them, it's kind of hard to make the case because those are precisely the communications DOJ believes Comey lied to Congress about. Stay tuned. Now, a bombshell. GAO reports Obamacare fraud. Some time ago, 3 House Republican Committee chairmen, Jason Smith of the Ways and Means Committee, Jim Jordan of the Judiciary Committee, and Brett Guthrie of the Energy and Commerce Committee, requested that the Government Accountability Office, the GAO, issue a report on its ongoing review of fraud risk associated with the Advanced Premium Tax Credits, the APTC. So, GAO tried to sneak people into the program. They created 4 fake accounts for plan year 2024, and then, when those were accepted, they tried with 20 fake accounts for plan year 2025. For plan year 2024, all 4 were accepted, despite the fact that none provided any of the required documentation. In order to get the advanced premium tax credits, a plan enrollee is required to provide documentation, including Social Security number, citizenship, and reported income. Enrolled in October 2024, the 4 fake accounts received tax credits amounting to $2,350 per month for the months of November and December 2024. So, GAO created 20 fake accounts and tried to enroll them in the Advanced Premium Tax Credit Program for plan year 2025. One was denied because of a lack of documentation, but the other 19 were allowed in. One of them was later denied because of a lack of documentation, but the other 18 accounts were allowed to collect a total of about $10,000 per month in fraudulent benefits with no provision of documentation at all. That's a 90% fraud rate. But wait, as they say, There's more. GAO also found evidence of misuse of Social Security numbers. It seems the agency which administers the Obamacare plan, the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, CMS, is so worried about fraud in the Obamacare system that it does not prevent a Social Security number from being used more than once. Let me say that again. It does not prevent a Social Security number from being used more than once. If someone tries to use a Social Security number that's already associated with an account that's receiving benefits, it might be an indication that the first person who used the Social Security number was using it fraudulently, and the second person is actually the one authorized to use it. So they allow the same Social Security number to be tied to multiple accounts because they don't want to mistakenly deny benefits to the authorized beneficiary. The consequences of that decision, as you might imagine, is horrendous fraud. For example, according to the GAO report, in plan year 2023 alone, one Social Security number was used to receive subsidized insurance coverage, quote, for over 26,000 days, over 71 years of coverage across 125 insurance policies, end quote. In plan year 2024, 66,000 Social Security numbers were associated with more than a year's worth of subsidized coverage. This GAO report exploded like a bomb on Capitol Hill. Anyone who thought the Congressional Republican Party was about to cave and provide the votes necessary to extend the expiring Obamacare premium tax credits is rethinking that this week. That's a nice segue to health care. Cast your mind back to the olden days, to wit, September, when the end of the fiscal year was approaching, and Congress had not completed its work on the funding bills necessary to keep the government open. Republicans wanted to pass a clean continuing resolution, an extension, to keep the government open while spending talks continued. Democrats said no. They would only provide the votes necessary to move a bill through the Senate in exchange for inclusion in that short-term funding bill of an extension to the Obamacare enhanced premium tax credits, so that the subsidies would not expire at the end of the year, as the law passed with only Democrat support 3 years ago requires. Did you get all that? Democrats passed a law 3 years ago when Joe Biden was president. Not a single Republican in the House nor a single Republican in the Senate voted for it. It was done solely on the strength of Democrat votes. And what that law did was extend massive subsidies to insurance companies on the order of $35 to $40 billion per year in the form of tax credits to help people buy Obamacare plans whose real costs were skyrocketing. People making up to 700% of the federal poverty line were able to qualify for these credits. And as we just discussed, there was a ton of fraud going on. And the law they passed said the subsidies would end on December 31, 2025. That's less than a month from now. Democrats, back in 2022, when they passed this law, figured that on December 31, 2025, one of two things would be true. Either Joe Biden would have been reelected, in which case Democrats would likely continue to control Capitol Hill or control Capitol Hill again, and they could simply pass a new law extending the subsidies into the future. Or Joe Biden would not have been reelected, in which case the Republicans would be in the White House, and that means the Republicans would be seen by the public to be in charge. And if the Republicans weren't willing to extend the subsidies, well, then the Republicans would get the blame for allowing the subsidies to expire and allowing millions of people to lose their insurance and allowing other tens of millions of people to see their health care costs go through the roof. So that's how we got where we are. The subsidies are expiring in less than a month. Democrats finally caved after 43 days, but only after receiving assurances from Majority Leader John Thune that they would be allowed to vote on a bill of their own design in mid-December. Well, mid-December is upon us, and that vote will take place this week on a bill offered by Senate Democrats that does one thing. It extends the subsidies on the same conditions as obtained now for 3 more years. No changes to the system, no reforms, no tightening to decrease the likelihood of fraud. Just 3 more years of the same subsidies to insurance companies. That bill is very likely to not receive 60 votes. Or we could say that bill is very unlikely to get 60 votes. Getting 60 votes would require 13 Senate Republicans to vote for it. And while there are certainly several Republican senators who might vote for it, I don't think it's going to be 13. Republicans in the Senate still have not decided whether or not they will offer a proposal of their own. It's very doubtful that Republicans would be able to come up with a bill that would win 60 votes either. So if the Republicans do choose to offer a bill, it will be a simple messaging bill that says, here's what we believe in on health care. On the House side, it's even more confusing. Democrats have introduced the same 3-year extension bill and have launched a discharge petition to try to win over moderate and vulnerable Republicans who think holding a vote might be the palliative they need for politics back home. I doubt there are enough Republicans in the House who will sign on to a discharge petition to make it work. That leaves Speaker Johnson, who has said he's putting together a health care bill of his own. We have no idea what's in it, and I don't think he knows what's in it yet. There are many ideas floating around: expanded health savings account, expanded risk pools, etc. But no Republican has yet introduced a significant and comprehensive piece of legislation to repeal, replace, or even reform Obamacare to help bring down costs across the board. Stay tuned. Now to the Inspector General's report on Signalgate. On Thursday, the Pentagon's Inspector General released a sanitized, unclassified version of his report into Signalgate. That's the episode back in the spring when Secretary of War Pete Hegseth used the commercial messaging app Signal to share information with other senior Trump administration national security officials and one member of the Fourth Estate who had been added to the group by mistake. The IG's verdict, quote, the Secretary sent non-public DoD information identifying the quantity and strike times of manned U.S. aircraft over hostile territory over an unapproved, unsecure network approximately 2 to 4 hours before the execution of those strikes. Using a personal cell phone to conduct official business and send non-public DoD information through Signal risks potential compromise of sensitive DoD information, which could cause harm to DoD personnel and mission objectives, end quote. The IG's investigation was launched in April at the request of the chairman and the ranking member of the Senate Armed Services Committee. Secretary Hegseth refused to be interviewed by the IG or any of his aides, while the IG report acknowledged that Hegseth is what it called, quote, the head original classification authority in the DoD and holds the authority to determine the required classification level of all DoD information he communicates, end quote. It also said that Hegseth violated DoD rules by using his personal cell phone for official business and by using a non-approved, commercially available messaging application to send non-public DoD information. 2 violations. Hegseth responded to the release of the report by posting to his X account, quote, no classified information, total exoneration, case closed, end quote. Now to the latest on the Venezuelan second tap. On Thursday, Admiral Frank Mitch Bradley went to Capitol Hill to meet behind closed doors with the chairman and ranking members of both the House and Senate Armed Services Committees to show them drone video and explain the thinking behind his order to send in a second missile strike that killed 2 survivors of the initial missile strike that took place a half an hour earlier. Here's how one news outlet reported the visit, quote, the video that key lawmakers viewed on Thursday showed the first strike on September 2, a fiery explosion that destroyed most of a boat in the Caribbean Sea. A black plume filled the air. When the smoke finally cleared about 30 minutes later, the front portion of the boat was overturned but still afloat, according to lawmakers and congressional staff who viewed the video or were briefed on it. 2 survivors, shirtless, clung to the hull, trying unsuccessfully to flip it back over, then climbed on it and slipped off into the water over and over. Then Admiral Frank M. Bradley, commander of the operation, gave an order for a follow-up strike. 3 flashes of light filled the video screen, and the men were gone. In the briefings, military officials are said to have told lawmakers they assumed the hull might be afloat because it still contained packs of cocaine. They thought that the survivors might eventually have managed to float back to Venezuela, allowing them to try again to deliver that cocaine, or that another boat could come retrieve it. They assumed the survivors could be communicating. End quote. Not at all surprisingly, Democrats and Republicans who viewed the tape came to radically different conclusions about the legality of the second strike. Democrats who spoke to the media after the briefing viewed it as an illegal order under the laws of war, which prohibit lethal action against shipwrecked survivors who pose no threat. While Republicans who spoke to the media after the briefing said they viewed the second strike as righteous and believed it was fully justified under the laws of war. Democrats say they want the video released to the public. President Trump said over the weekend that he would like to see the video released to the public. The Pentagon has made no official commitment on the topic. Stay tuned. Now to a redistricting recap. We've already discussed the Supreme Court ruling in the Texas case. House Republicans will likely pick up 5 seats there as a result of that new map, so that will offset California's move to re-gerrymander their state and net 5 new seats for Democrats there. On Friday, the Indiana House approved a new congressional district map that will likely move the state's House delegation from 7 Republicans and 2 Democrats to 9 Republicans and 0 Democrats. Now, that map has to move through the state's Senate, and that's not at all a sure thing. The president of the state Senate in Indiana has been saying for months that he doesn't have the votes to approve a new map, and we'll find out this week. He can choose to put the map on the floor, or he can choose not to. The Indiana State Senate is back in session as of today, and the reports from Indiana say a vote in the state Senate could come Thursday, so stay tuned. That's our Washington Report for this week. Thanks for tuning in. Until next week, be well and be active.